Okay, so let's start again. Chapter 2 of the book of Shmos, of the book of Exodus. We're going to be learning today about the birth of Moshe, the birth of the Savior of the Jewish people. I'll give you a little bit of the context before we start to read inside. So if you remember last week, we were discussing how the Egyptian astrologers told Pharaoh that we see that the leader, the Savior of the Jewish people is going to be born. And we suggest that you throw him into the Nile River. If you remember, because the Nile, God can't get you back. God always punishes midah kineged midah, measure for a measure. The way you sin is the way God punishes you back. And God had saved Abraham from fire, when Nimrod threw him into the fire. God had saved Yitzchak, Isaac, from the sword of his father when he wanted to kill him. God had saved Yaakov from the slavery of his father-in-law Lavan. So those won't work, but fire, water will work. Especially because God has already promised never to bring a flood onto the Jewish people, onto the world. So there's no way He can punish you back, so you're going to be safe. So they make a decree that all the children, both the Jews and the non-Jews, must be thrown into the Nile because they weren't even sure they weren't sure, was this child going to be a Jewish child or an Egyptian child? Why were the astrologers a little confused? Because Moshe would grow up in the house of Paro, in the Egyptian house. So they had this little blurry image of where exactly this leader, the Savior of the Jewish people, would come from, a Jewish home or an Egyptian home. So every single child was being thrown into the Nile. As a result of this, there was a man called Amram. Amram was one of the most prominent of the Jewish people. He was from the tribe of Levi, and he was one of the leaders, and he said, if we're going to have children, what's the point? They're going to take our children, and they're going to throw them into the Nile River and kill them all. So why should he even bother having children? And he goes and he publicly divorces his wife. Yocheved. Publicly gets divorced. And that was an example that caused many, many Jewish people, if not all the Jewish people, to follow suit. And they too also divorced their wives because we're living in such a terrible exile, our kids will be destroyed and be killed in the Nile anyway. What's the point? Okay? What happened? There was a young little girl. Her name was Miriam. Miriam was the daughter of Yocheved and Amram, the older sister of who would become Moshe. And she goes to her father and she says to him, what you're doing is even worse than Paro. Paro only wants to kill the boys, all the boys. And you're killing not only the boys, you're not even allowing the girls to be born. So you're killing the boys and the girls. Paro is only killing them in this world, but their souls will go into the world to come. By you not even allowing them to be born, you're not even allowing them to come into this world and into the next world. Paro, maybe his decree will be fulfilled. Maybe it won't be fulfilled. But you're guaranteed that if you're not going to be married, guaranteed that no Jewish children will ever be born. And so therefore, not a good idea. Miriam also, she was a young girl, 5 years old, 6 years old. She prophesied that they would give birth to a child who would be the one to save the Jewish people. And because of that, Amram wasn't embarrassed to say, my daughter, you are right. He kisses her on her head. He said, my daughter, you are right. And with that, we can begin to read chapter 2, verse number 1.
Did everybody remarry?
Yeah, that's what we're going to read, this verse, Mordechai.
Okay.
And now that you know what happened, now we're going to read how Amram goes to remarry his wife, Yocheved.
A man of the house of Levi
They all live happily ever after.
went and remarried a daughter of Levi. The woman became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She saw that he was good, and she hid him for 3 months. She could no longer hide him, so she took him for a reed basket.
Okay, 1 second. So before we go, so that's why she goes to get remarried. Now, it says the source for that in the words, because like last week they were challenging me, how did you see that in the story? It says a man in the house of Levi went and took for a wife the daughter of Levi. What did he went and took? You get married. You don't have to go to, you don't went and got married. Where did he go? Traveled to a different city to go find her? They were living there. So Rashi explains he went, meaning he acted upon the advice of his daughter and he changed his mind to go back and to remarry this woman who was not a new wife. It was a woman he had been married to for many years. He's remarrying her. Now you'll notice that the Torah refers to her as the daughter of Levi. Doesn't say her name, the daughter of Levi. You know how old she was? You want to guess?
12, 72.
She was 130 years old. 130 years old. Yeah. Okay?
And then she went ahead and had another child.
So why is she called the daughter? Exactly. So why is she called the daughter of Levi? A miracle happened. When Amram remarried her, she became as young as if she was a young girl again. All the wrinkles of her face, like anti-aging medicine, disappeared. She looked like a young woman once again. Okay? I know the ladies like to hear that part of the miracle. That's always a good story. She looked young. It worked. Okay, anyway, so she conceives and she hides him for 3 months. There is a discussion. Most commentaries say that she only conceived after she got remarried, and that's why she gave birth in the 6th month, which is why she's able to hide him for 3 months until her due date, which was only, they kept track once she got remarried. So they were going to come looking for a baby 9 months after they got remarried, but she actually gave birth after 6 months. And therefore, verse number 3, Jeffrey.
102, how much longer? How long do you carry a baby at that age? Probably the parameters are not the same, maybe.
So maybe she was pregnant from before.
There is an opinion that I saw that I wasn't going to mention, now that you're saying it. There is an opinion that they were actually pregnant when he divorced her. So when he divorced her, he knew they were going to have another child, but no one would suspect it. That's why he'd be able to hide the fact that she was going to give birth to a child, because who are we looking to see if she's going to give birth when she's divorced?
Oh, right. But then he
It's not like today where after you become pregnant, then you have to go get married. There, after you get pregnant, now it's time to get divorced so that the baby would be safe. But that was an act of sacrifice that they did, according to that interpretation, that in order to inspire everyone else to get, because they didn't, according to this interpretation, they weren't trying to create a public display of divorce to make everyone else get divorced. They were doing it for their own safety. And once everyone else started to copy this, they were willing to risk their own safety, their own child, in order to create an example of marriage to inspire everyone else to get married as well.
That's a much better interpretation.
You like that? Okay, so I'm glad that Marsha brought it up.
Because 9 months is gestation. It's not going to change, right? It takes 9 months.
Unless you got a preemie.
No, you can give birth earlier or later.
Yeah, but that's 6 months.
I saw a commentary, the Evan Ezra says that a very proper child, a very healthy child, stays 11 months. I'm going to show it to my wife later because every one of my kids stay longer, They get bigger and healthier in there. 11 months is pushing it. She won't like that idea, I promise.
11 months, they already have teeth.
My aunt had 5, carried all of them.
Okay, let's go. Verse number 3, Jeffrey.
So she took for him a reed basket, smeared it with clay and tar, put the child into it, and placed it amongst the reeds at the Nile's edge. His sister stood from afar in order to know what would happen to him.
Okay, so basically, she takes the outside, she smears it with tar, which would be waterproof to keep the water out. But the inside, she didn't want to put tar because it smells. She didn't want that her son should have to have a tzaddik like Moshe, should have to deal with that kind of fragrance. She puts the inside with clay, and she puts him, this is very interesting. Where does she put him? Into the reeds, right? She placed the baby amongst the reeds of the Nile edge. She does not directly place the basket into the Nile. Now Yocheved actually wanted to put the baby into the Nile. The reason is, why deliberately into the Nile? Because the astrologers, and she was right, the astrologers were waiting to see that the child who would become the savior of the Jewish people was thrown into the Nile. And once Moshe went into the Nile, the astrologers come to Pharaoh and say, it's up. He was thrown to, you can stop the decree, we don't need to kill any more babies, because the person who will save the Jewish people has already been put into the Nile River. They didn't know there was a basket there. And so in fact, Moshe, from the day not that he's born, 3 months after he's born, as a young child, is already saving literally thousands and thousands of Jewish and non-Jewish lives. Both. Thousands of lives he saves. But let me finish. But if so, why wouldn't you put him directly into the Nile River? If Yocheved sees prophetically, and they knew that astrologer was saying that the child will save the Jewish people will be born, and they want to kill him in the Nile, and they actually, I should say one more thing. The astrologers also knew that the downfall of the person who would be the savior of the Jewish people would come through water, which is a reference to what? What water would cause the downfall of Moshe?
Flood.
What flood? The Red Sea wasn't the downfall. That was one of his highlights. How's his career? Hitting the rock, right? When the Jews complained about water, excellent Marsha, the Jews complained about that they didn't have water, and he hits the rock and instead of speaking to it, that water would become his downfall. He wouldn't be able to enter the land of Israel. So the astrologers saw that he would be destroyed through water. So they deliberately said he has to be put into the water. And so once Moshe was in the water, the astrologers see in their blurry vision, this person will be the savior of the Jews, is in the water. The decree is over. So if so, then the question is, why didn't she put him directly into the Nile? Why did she put him into the reeds next to the Nile?
So they're not going to see that he's in the water.
Because she didn't know.
She didn't know. Yocheved prophetically knew. Everyone in Egypt knew that the decree was to throw him into the Nile because that's how he'll be killed. So
She didn't want to put him in the water because that was his downfall.
but he's in a basket. She's putting him right next to the Nile.
He could survive in the water.
She wanted him to go into the Nile. What do you think happens when you put a basket in the reeds next to the Nile? It's not going to sink and float into the water. The tide goes up. He did get up. He did end up in the water. That's what naturally happens.
All the other babies go in baskets too, or did they just put them right in the water?
No, the Egyptian threw them in the Nile.
Oy, but didn't angels come and take
Yes, that's just last week. They were saved. They were saved. But they didn't know that at the time. Moshe is not being thrown in by an Egyptian soldier. He's being secretly put in a basket that will float by his sister to preemptively before the Egyptian soldiers, before the Egyptian soldiers find him. So why couldn't she put him directly into the Nile? The answer is that we're not allowed to have any benefit from idol worship. The idol, even to save a life. If I come to you and say, it's not I, God forbid, if a man, an idol worshiper says, bow down to an idol or I'm going to kill you, normally you're allowed to do a sin to save your life. Idol worship is one of the three sins that a person's never allowed to transgress or to get benefit from, no matter what. And so therefore, even though this might save Moshe's life, she couldn't directly get benefit from the Nile River because the Egyptians worshipped the Nile. That was a god for them. So therefore, she puts him in the reeds next to the Nile. She's not directly benefiting from the Nile. Now we know that eventually the basket would sink into the Nile, and that would end the decree against all the children being thrown into the Nile.
What are the two other sins?
Adultery and murder.
Why didn't they just kill him if they were waiting and watching and they knew he was placed and not thrown into...
They didn't know.
But you said they went to Pharaoh and said he was placed in the river? And
Not because they saw that Moshe was in. In the stars, they saw that this star energy of the Savior of the Jewish people had now been put into the Nile River. They couldn't see the basket. The satellite imagery wasn't so good back then. So they couldn't see them.
I thought they were watching.
No, they weren't watching. They saw there was no one there. She's hiding in the bushes, in the reeds. Okay? So it's on the page, verse number 5. Jeffrey?
Where is 5? Top of 351.
Yeah, verse 4 says that his sister stood from afar and she was watching to see what's going to happen. She wants to, So verse 5, Pharaoh's daughter comes.
Pharaoh's daughter went down to bathe in the Nile, and her maidens were walking along the Nile, and she saw the basket among the reeds, and she sent her maidservant, and she took it. She opened it, and she saw him, the child. And look, a youth was crying. She had compassion on him, and she said, "This is one of the Hebrew boys."
Okay, so much to say on these verses. So first of all, Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile. Know what Pharaoh's daughter's name is?
Miriam?
No, Miriam is the daughter of Yocheved. She's Moshe's sister. What's Pharaoh's daughter's name? The princess. I can't hear you. Hesheba? No.
No, I know.
Batya. Batya. Batya is the daughter of Pharaoh. She's the princess. Why is she called Batya? Batya, or Bas.
She went to bathe in the...
Yeah, well, let's go one at a time. Batya, I'm going to say it in a minute. Batya means bat, or Bas, daughter. Yudke is God. She's the daughter of God. That's the name Batya. Where did you get the name daughter of God? God says to Batya, I don't know if he says to her, but in the Medrash, he says, you adopted, you took care of one of my children. It wasn't naturally yours. You made it yours. And it grew, sheltered it. I'm going to make you my daughter.
Right.
Understand?
Oh, wait, so her name wasn't always Bat?
Right.
Batya is a Hebrew name. I doubt that in the Egyptian court, her Egyptian name was Batya. I'm sure she had some very nice Egyptian name that befitted the princess, the daughter of Pharaoh.
So who
But
named her in the Bible?
well, she's not given a name here. We don't see a name here. The Torah later, the Medrash refers to as Batya. She actually converts and becomes a Jew. That's why one of the explanations why she came down to the Nile, where she was actually coming to wash, to go to the mikvah, to purify herself from idol worship and to go and become a Jew. And therefore, the Torah gives her the name Batya because God, not many people does God say, I'm going to refer to you as my daughter. But since you went and adopted a child that wasn't yours, and by you adopting that child, you showed that love for another human being, and you made that child like your child, I'm going to make you my daughter. Yes?
So, the women didn't have the Torah yet, so did they go to the mikvah?
Yeah.
Egyptian Jewish women?
Well, the laws of the Torah hadn't been given yet, but mikvah was, the concept of mikvah, all these laws were known.
And the thing is, and I know, I'm just saying, but the Nile River was like
Idol worship.
God to the Egyptians, so how could they go in and...
So there is a commentary that says that the fact that the Chassidic commentary, that by the fact that she went into the Nile to use it as a mikvah, at that moment destroyed the idol worship of it. And that's the moment when Moshe's basket could go into the Nile because there's no longer an idol worship. When Batya came down to the Nile, she was going to use it as a bathing house, as a mikvah. She was breaking that idol status. And that moment, Moshe's basket was able to go into the Nile because no longer was like an idol. Everything, all the little pieces fit in very nicely. Okay, there's more I wanted to tell you about these verses. So she comes and she sees the basket amongst the reeds. She sends someone to take it. Now, in the Hebrew, this is important. If you look at the Hebrew word that she sent her maidservant, it says, Vatishlach es amasa vatikaches, the fourth line, the end of the last word of verse 5. Vatishlach es amasa is translated here as her maidservant to take it. But there's another, Rashi tells us as follows. Rashi tells us that she actually, her maidservant said, you can't reach it, it was far, far away. They said, are you crazy? This is a Jewish child crying. If another Egyptian breaks the law, that's one thing. You're the princess, you're Pharaoh's daughter. You are going to go break the law that your own father made? You can't go and take this child. So she said, okay, I'll take it myself. So she stretches out her hand. V'hu lashon yad. Rashi says it's the expression of her hand. She stretches out her hand, but she couldn't reach. And God did a miracle. And God stretched her hand by many amas. And amma also means a cubit, is an arm's length. It's called an amma. We tell you the ark was 50 amos, 50 arm lengths. Her arm stretched out several times of her length of her arm, miraculously. And she was able to reach the basket that was floating inside the Nile River. She sent her hand, that's why, yes, it reached very, very far to be able to take the child back. It's a very, very powerful message. The Kotzker Rebbe says something very, very beautiful. Kotzker Rebbe says that, could she have possibly known when she stretched out her hand that a miracle would happen and she'd be able to reach far into the Nile and take out the basket? No. She couldn't have known that.
But so why would she try to reach
Good
it?
question. So why would she even stretch her hand out? If the basket's all the way to the other end of the table, in the river, she can't reach it. And her maids don't want to go swimming in the river to go get it for her. She's standing there. Why would she stretch out her hand if she can't reach? It would seem like she had no hope of actually reaching the child, right?
Right.
Says the Kotzker Rebbe, sometimes you look at a situation and it seems helpless. It seems like it's too far away. So therefore, we resign ourselves to doing nothing. Say, since I anyway can't solve the problem, since I anyway can't reach all the way over there, why should I try? Why bother? I'll just sit here with my arms crossed and do nothing. She stretched out her hand. Once you stretch out your hand, then God will do the rest. Then God will do the rest. You just gotta start. She did the maximum that she was capable of doing, and then God increased her maximum abilities much, much more than she ever could have done on her own.
It's like you did with
And I didn't do it. God did it, and they went together. Yeah. But that's the philosophy that enables us to do what we do in Chabad, because we don't say, oh, it's too far away, it's too distant, we can't achieve it, we can't pay for it, so we're not going to do it. Yeah, that's the logical way of going. But if you do that, then you're right, you won't reach it. Okay, then going on to verse number 6. So it says she opened and she saw that the child was crying, and it was a youth crying. Right? He was crying with the voice of a mature boy. Which means, the Kli Yakar says that she thought he sounded like he was older than he really was. Because if she would have known that this was a child that had just been born now, after my father's decree, she might not have been willing to take him. So he gave the impression of being an older boy. And alternatively, his body was formed like a fully grown boy already.
Like
Even
a
though,
3-year-old or
even
like,
though,
No, his body was perfectly formed. It was all,
like a man, like a.
not like a man. He was born circumcised, by the way. I
She
didn't,
was born circumcised?
I forgot to tell you something important. It said, when she gave birth, I forgot to say it. It says she saw that he was good. I didn't talk about this. I missed this point. We read before in verse 2 that she gave birth, right? She saw that he was good.
good means
And hit him.
he's already
What do you mean he was good? One, he was born circumcised and with perfect limbs.
But an Egyptian would use that phrase, he's good?
No, this is when Yocheved saw that the boy she had given birth to. Not that Jewish mothers normally think that their kid is good. It's a very rare thing for a Jewish mother to think that her child is the best child. Very rare. But she had a reason because he was born circumcised. Or we know, where else we say that something was called good?
When the creation.
When God created light.
Very good.
God created light and he saw that it was good. So when he was born, the whole house was filled with light.
How can
Yeah.
you be born circumcised? Isn't circumcision the ritual?
Removal of the foreskin.
So even if
Most of us are born with a foreskin.
right, but even if there's no or less foreskin, they can consider that circumcised. I thought circumcision meant the ritual of circumcision.
There's good question. There's two parts to a bris. One is the removal of skin. That can only happen one time, right? Either if you're circumcised, if let's say you're born circumcised, means that the skin is not there. There's nothing to cut off. There's another element to the bris, which is the ritual element where you take blood to enter the covenant of God and you make a blessing. Right. Which would mean that even if a person had been circumcised in the hospital by a doctor, not with a rabbi making the kiddush with the wine and making out the kids, making the blessing and giving the name. So even though now there's no more foreskin there to remove, assuming the doctors removed all of it, assuming that was a fully complete medical circumcision, it still would require a prick of blood to be hataf as dam, a prick of blood to have the blessing and to make the covenant of God. So maybe Moshe had to have that. Well, they didn't have the mitzvah of circumcision yet. Most of the Jews weren't even being circumcised. That's why before they left Egypt, they all had to be circumcised to partake of the Pesach offering. But the point is he was born without the foreskin. The foreskin represents the physical, crass, very, very low sexual desires of a human being. That's what the foreskin represents. That's where it is. Being born without that means he was a very naturally spiritual person. So women don't have a foreskin. They're naturally more spiritual and they're less physically coarse and crass than a man is. Okay? Moving along to verse number 7. Moshe's sister.
Moshe's sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call for you a wet nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?"
Okay. How did Moshe's sister Miriam get involved with Paro's daughter? Where did she come from? She was watching, yeah, and then what happened? What did she see happen?
that she took the baby, she about to
So you see that the princess takes a baby, and then?
and then she looking for somebody to take care of him, to give him milk. He's crying. Where
He's
is he
crying. The boy is crying, right?
And she show up, and she said, "Oh, you want to find somebody for you to?"
Well, so you don't think she was waiting for the girl to come? She tries giving Moshe to one of the nurses to nurse.
But
They call different Egyptian nurses from the palace to come, but Moshe refuses to suck from any of them. Because the mouth that would speak the words of God should drink the not kosher milk of an Egyptian woman. Moshe then, even as a little baby, 3 months old, absolutely refused to be satisfied to take anyone's milk. So he's still crying and he refuses to eat. And then finally Miriam says, I've got to do something. My brother's crying and I can't do anything for him. So she comes forward and says, should I go get a Jewish woman to nurse the child? Basically saying, this is a Jewish kid.
She already knew Batya that it's a Jew.
Well, yes, she already knew. She saw he was circumcised.
That's why it was no problem. Here, take her.
Right. She saw he was circumcised. That's what she said. This is one of the Hebrew boys. She had compassion. She said, this is one of the Hebrew boys. As she said, let me go get a Jewish woman. So Pharaoh's daughter said, verse number 8.
Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Go. So the girl went and called to the child's mother.
Go on.
Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Take this child and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages. So the woman took the boy and nursed him. The child grew up, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became like her son. She named him Moshe, and she said, For I drew him from the water.
Okay.
So Moses stayed with his mother?
So what happens? This girl goes, Miriam goes, and which Jewish wet nurse does she call?
The mother.
The mother, Yocheved. So Yocheved comes, and Batis Paro says to her, Hey lechi. The Hebrew word is, if you want to see it, where is it over here? She says, lechi, go and get the thing. But lechi could also mean lecha, it's yours. And basically she's prophetically, not knowing what she's saying, she's really saying, here, this is your child. Go take him, he's yours. Raise him.
She didn't know.
She didn't know that this is the mother of the child. She just knows that it's a Jewish child she found in the river, and she needs a Jewish woman to nurse the child. So Moshe is now growing up with his mother, back in his home.
So he stays there, not like he comes back every day.
No. It's interesting, yeah. It's not like today, you want to have, take the baby. When the baby's big enough to play and talk, then bring him back to me, It was a different environment back then.
That's how it was. You take them, keep them, and then bring them back to
Yeah, that's exactly what she says to him. Right here. Take this child.
Paid for it.
She gets paid for it. So she takes him home. And then when the child grew up, then she brought him back to Paro's house. How old is considered growing up? When he's weaned, which is the age of 2. However, there's a commentary, there's a medrash that says that she was able to keep him until the age of 12. She pushed it off. He's not. He's very attached. He's home. He's sick. I don't know. She found different reasons. She procrastinated.
And
Found by the age of 12,
the girl didn't come say, "Where's my kid?" Or
I guess she can do it, but eventually,
Busy.
she was.
I don't think Pharaoh was very thrilled about this child either, probably. I mean,
Does Pharaoh?
No, I'm sure not.
Pulled this kid out of the river. I mean, he probably.
Right, so that's an excellent question. Is how much does Paro even know about this child? Like where he comes from? Is he a Jewish? Like what does Paro know about him? That's a good question at this point. Anyway, here's what I'm saying. Verse 10, the child goes up. Batya names Moshe. Right?
Right.
And what's the name she gives him?
Moshe.
Moshe.
That's an Egyptian name.
That's an Egyptian name. Let me ask you a question. When Moshe was born, you don't think his mother gave him a Jewish name?
Of course she did.
Of course she did, right? He actually had 10 names. But the most common name was Yikusil. You ever heard the name Yikusil?
No.
Yikusil means, Kave means hope. Kael is God. And when he was born, Yikusil, he created new hope in God. He had other names, so he actually had 10 names. Imagine the 10 names that he had. Not relevant for the moment. Yikusil, I meant to make the list. I had the measure in another book. I didn't make notes and I forgot. But Yikusil means, oh my God, that was the name he had, the most common name. He had other names too. 10 names. Why would the Torah use the name, the Egyptian name, that was given to him by the Egyptian princess instead of his Jewish name?
He's in Egypt, so it's not going to be weird that he have a different name.
Aaron has a Hebrew name. Miriam has a Hebrew name. Look, the whole entire Torah, not once do we find mentioned in the actual Bible any other name for Moshe besides for the Egyptian name given to him by a non-Jew. Okay, someone who converted. But by an Egyptian princess, an Egyptian name. More than that, when God speaks to Moshe, and God calls Moshe by his name, what name does God himself use? Moshe. The whole Torah, Yomer Hashem Moshe. God spoke to Moshe. And there's a verse where God calls Moshe's name twice, an expression of endearment. He says, Moshe, Moshe. God calls him Moshe, Moshe.
Yeah. Yeah, if he would have had a
doesn't
Jewish
faze
name, the
God
Jewish
either
people
way.
may not listen to him.
Uh.
Because he's an ex, you know what I mean?
Is it maybe because you could still have the Egyptian name, but still be inside of you?
Yeah, that doesn't make him not a Jew, but the question is, why? If he had a Jewish name, I understand the name means he was saved from the water. I understand. But at the end of the day, he had a Jewish name from birth. He had a birth 8 days, whatever they did, Hatafas Dam, they did he had a Jewish name. For 3 months he lived at home. He wasn't called Moshe at home. He was called Yekasil.
Because he loved, I think he did it out of respect for the woman who adopted him, and he loved her.
But why does God use that name? Why does the Torah use that name?
Maybe for the same reason. Kind of show us the
Because
point.
that's the name.
Of course it shows the point.
God gave Batya her name too. And maybe he did it for the same reason.
Yeah, but we don't find that mentioned explicitly in the Torah. Here it's interesting that in fact, you'll notice when Moshe is born, until here, the Torah does not use his name at all. If you notice, all the verses we read till now, Moshe is nameless. A boy is born, and the sister goes and stands at the edge of the river. She sees the child crying. Doesn't say she saw Moshe crying. Right? She saw a child crying, and she heard the voice of the child. Only now after Batya gives the Egyptian name Moshe, which is seemingly an Egyptian word, only then does the Torah now refer to him, and for the rest of the Torah, till the day he dies, as Moshe, an Egyptian name.
Well,
Seems
maybe,
strange.
God didn't worry or concern himself what type of name he did or was going to give him. Maybe he saw it as, there are Egyptians and there are Jews, and that's...
In fact, to make the question stronger, one of the things that the Jews did that made them earn redemption was they had no mitzvahs, the Jews in Egypt. They were completely unreligious, but they kept their Jewish names. And Moshe, the leader, is walking with an Egyptian name. So, let me give you a few answers. The Das Akedim explains that she actually gave him a Hebrew name. Moshe, Batya named him Moshe. Moshe is not an Egyptian word. It's a Hebrew word. Batya spoke Hebrew.
Oh, she was Jewish.
She converted, and she learned Hebrew, and she was a Hebrew child. So Batya gave him a Hebrew name. I misled you. I said it's an Egyptian name. It's Egyptian. The word kimin hamayim mishisuhu. She drew him from the water. That's Hebrew. So Moshe is actually a Hebrew name. So yes, there's a Hebrew name given by his mother. There's a Hebrew name given by Batya. And the Torah wants to use the name Batya. Why? The Medrash says something very, very beautiful. This is a very beautiful message. Says the Medrash, from here you can learn, you can infer, how great is the reward to those who perform acts of kindness for somebody else. Because Batya did an act of kindness and she saved the life of Moshe, therefore the Torah for the rest of the lifetime of Moshe will only refer to him with the name that was given to him by the woman that saved his life. As a token of gratitude, to show how much appreciation Moshe has, or the Torah has, for the fact that she did this act of kindness where she risked her life and she saved this child. It's a beautiful message that we can see how important it is to help, not only how important it is, but the reward that God himself refers to Moshe, not by the name by his bris, not from the 10 names the Medrash says, but by the name that was given to him by Batya.
Yeah. And it may be more important and hold more almost love and weight for that child when he grows up older, because he's looking at his name.
Yeah.
Someone who wasn't even a relative yet really did something significant, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. Going on, verse number 11, Moshe is going to begin to grow a little older. Patty.
It was in those days that Moshe grew up.
Patty, is the microphone on? You see a green light on there? The green light's on? There you go.
Was it on before?
Oh, yeah.
It was on already?
Okay, so it was in those days that Moshe grew up, and he went out to his brothers, and he saw their burden. He saw an Egyptian man striking a Hebrew man, one of his brothers. He turned this way and that way, and he saw that no man was there. So he struck the Egyptian and hid him in the sand.
Okay. A lot to say. So, Moshe grows up in the palace. He becomes quite a young man, quite a very charming, beautiful, talented young man, and makes quite a reputation for himself in the palace. Actually, I should have told you the story before you read Patty. When he was a little bit younger, one day he was sitting on Paro's lap. I guess, just hit me this moment, that obviously Moshe did go to visit Batya, because this story happened when Moshe was a young child. So, before he came to move into the palace on a permanent basis. And everyone loved Moshe. He was like the cute little kid in the palace. He was a very charismatic young boy. And he was sitting on Paro's lap, and all of a sudden he grabs the crown off of Paro's head and puts it on his own head. And right away, Bilam, one of the ministers who I mentioned to you last week, who was no friend of the Jewish people, says, "Oh, Paro, this kid is a kid, the Jewish savior." He knew, Bilam must have known. So this kid is dangerous. Look, he's already trying to fight against you, and take the crown off your head and put it onto his. You have to kill him. And Paro's like, kill him? He's a little boy, a cute little boy. You just grab my crown, you know. And he wasn't sure what to do, so he turns to the other ministers and says, "What should I do? Should we kill him?" So right then an angel came disguised as the minister and says, "No, he's just a little boy. Little kids are attracted to shiny things. You know, the crown's obviously shiny, it's gold and there's jewels, etc. So let's do a test. Let's put before him 2 bowls, one with gold coins, dull gold coins, and one with glowing hot coals. And that's right. And let's see what he does." So he put before this little boy a pot or a bowl of glowing hot coals and gold, dull gold. Moshe was not stupid. He was a smart man. He was Jewish, right? And so he was going to go for the gold. And the last second, the angel Gabriel comes and slams his hand to reach the coals. He grabs the hot coal so hot, he put it into his mouth. And from then on, that's when Moshe had a speech impediment, that he could never talk without stuttering again.
This is Seti, right? Not the father of Ramesses?
Who? Pharaoh?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what his historical name would be.
What is he called?
In the Torah, Pharaoh.
Oh, just
The Pharaoh. Okay. Anyways, as he grows older, Moshe becomes a real prince, becomes very, very active in helping his brothers. He used to go out to the fields where they were working. He literally saw the brothers. He felt for them. He felt their pain. Sure, he knew he was Jewish. He grew up.
Were these his actual biological brothers?
No, he was from the tribe of Levi. No, his only biological brother was Aaron. But they're the Jewish people.
Aaron wasn't a slave, though.
No, the whole tribe of Levi wasn't slaves.
So how did he know that he was Jewish?
He grew up in his mother raised him.
Right, so he knew that he's Jewish. So as a boy, he would...
He grew up in a tradition, from home. He grew up, he went to Cheder, I'm saying, he went to Cheder, but his mother taught him the Aleph Beis, and the mother taught him all the stories of the Jewish people. He got a good Jewish education.
So he would want to stay with his mother. Why would he go to...
He had no choice. He didn't have a choice in those days. Bati was his new mother, his real mother was just his nurse.
So who taught him the Hebrew and the
biological mother?
Yocheved, who was officially just his wet nurse.
Okay, yeah.
Now, Moshe knows that Miriam and Aaron are his sister and brother. He knows that, so she must have told him. But she had to, for all official purposes, in order to keep himself alive, he had to act as if Bati was his real mother, his adopted mother, and he had to live in the palace. But his heart was with the Jewish people. And so he used to go out, he used to work with them. He felt for their suffering. And he used to do all the things that he could to try and help them. One thing that he did to help the Jewish people was he went to Pharaoh and said, "I see you're working your people way too hard. If you have a machine and you work it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you're going to destroy it. If you work your slaves 7 days a week, you're going to wear them out. It's not effective slave labor. You'll be much smarter, much more effective for you to give them 1 day a week off that they can rest a little bit and rejuvenate. They'll be better slaves. They'll be able to work harder the other 6 days of the week." Right.
So he created the
And
Shabbos, right?
that's right. So Pharaoh says, "Good idea. Which day should we give them?" So I think Saturday, would be a very good day to give them.
It started Friday night.
Yeah. So they had Shabbos off. He did anything to help the Jewish people as much as he could. Until one day, he comes and he saw, we just read in verse number 11, he sees an Egyptian man striking a Hebrew man, one of his brothers. Now obviously there was nothing unique to seeing an Egyptian beating a Jew. This was Timothy considered, this was daily occurrence. This was a regular thing that the Egyptians beat the Jews. They whipped them, they beat them, but this was different. Why was this different? This Egyptian man had fallen in love with the woman, the wife of this Jew that he was beating. The woman was called Shlomis Bas Divri. This woman, Shulamis, we'll say in a second, he had a desire for her. So what did he do? He went in the middle of the night, he woke up the husband, sent him out on some mission to go, pick a dandelion, go pick roses. And when the man was gone, he came back into the house, pretending to be her husband, raped her, and he left.
How does he pretend to be her husband?
It was dark. I don't know exactly. I'm not so sure what he pretended. He pretended. He pretended he was a husband. He came back in the middle of the night. The house was dark. They didn't have lights hit it like today. You realize there was no night was dark. There was no street lights outside, right? There's no electric, lamps burning in the hallway. There's no. If you wanted to see, you lit a candle, whatever. So if you were poor, if you didn't want to, if it was dangerous to leave a candle lit all night, you had a candle lit. So he walks into the darkness. He gets into bed with her.
Okay, and
She probably knows that she's getting married.
I guess he probably felt. I doubt that he felt. Chances are she will, but what are you going to do, right? It's an Egyptian soldier. So in the morning he leaves. His husband comes back home and he realizes what's going on. He realizes what happened when he was gone. That day, this is an ongoing occurrence. The Egyptian taskmaster sees that this Jew knows what he had done to his wife, and so he's beating him to death, planning on killing him. He's beating him out of anger, beating him to death, and then he's going to go take his wife. Moshe sees what's going on prophetically. Moshe understands he's not just beating him because he's a sadistic Egyptian who wants to beat up a Jewish person and kill him, which was happened. Jews were killed on a regular basis. But this was much more than that. He was killing the man to then go kidnap his wife and make her his, or take him as a sex slave or whatever. And so Moshe looks this way and that way, meaning Moshe looks and he sees that there was no children who would ever be born from this person who would convert to Judaism, who become righteous. He looks that way, sees no one's watching, he sees there's no merit. He looks this way, no kids will be born in the future. He looks that way, he looks in the past. He sees that this Egyptian had no merits, no good deeds he had ever done in the past. And because he had no good deeds in the past, and no good who will come from him in the future, Moshe then kills him. How does he kill him? Either says he took a shovel and hit him over the head, or he killed him with a brick, or the Gemara says he said the name of God, the name that we don't know how to pronounce, the unpronounceable name of God, and with that he struck him dead. He strikes him dead, and he hides him in the sand. Okay? You have to.
Reading this, you just think he looked around to make sure nobody was watching him.
Oh, that's obviously the simple reading of the verse. He looked this way and that way. Oh, no one's watching. And that's the simple verse. Right. And the Torah doesn't take, the simple interpretation of the verse remains. The simple interpretation remains, but there's obviously much deeper interpretation as well. The deeper interpretation.
It's like that. He's looking here, looking there, and then he's kidding.
So the deeper interpretation, he looked this way, he looked that way, means he looked into his future, he looked into his past, he saw there's no good in any direction, nothing good would ever come from him, and therefore he goes and he kills him.
So the name, is that the 72?
Let the name of God.
That no one knows how to pronounce.
Yes. Yes.
But Moses did, right?
You have to realize, by the way, this is a tremendous act of sacrifice. It's a tremendous act of sacrifice for Moshe to do this, because he's risking his career. He's risking his time in the palace. Right. Pharaoh were to find out, as he does, he's dead meat, right? Let's see what happens. Verse 13.
He went out on the second day, and look, 2 Hebrew men were quarreling. He said to the wicked one, "Why would you strike your friend?" He replied, "Who made you a man, a prince, and a judge over us? Do you plan to slay me as you have slain the Egyptians?" Moshe became frightened and said, "Indeed, the matter has become known."
Okay, so he goes out the next day, and he sees 2 Jews are fighting. Who are these 2 Jews? Dasan and Aviram. Dasan and Aviram would become a permanent sore, permanent, thorn, that's what I meant. Permanent thorn in the side of Moshe. Throughout the entire time the Jews are in the desert, many times we're going to run into these 2 guys who cause a lot of problems. They're quarreling. Moshe sees them quarreling, says one, "Rasha, you're a wicked man, why would you hit your friend?" He says to the wicked person. Says the Gemara, from here we see that even to raise your hand to hit someone, just to raise your hand to hit someone, is already makes the person considered a wicked person. Okay? And so the guy says, "Who are you?" The man replies, Dasan says to him, "Who are you? What, are you going to go kill me like you killed the Egyptian?" And so on a simple reading of the verse, Moshe becomes afraid because he realizes he thought no one knew. Right? He looked this way and that way, no one knew. And now it's known. Once it's known, the word's going to get out there, he's in trouble, he has to escape. But how did he know? How did Dasan and Aviram know? If no one was there, right? Simple reading means he looked this way, that way, no one's there. So how did Dasan find out? And here's something I learned today, I learned on Shabbos actually, that it just shows you how ungrateful someone can be. I told you who the woman was that was being raped by the Egyptian.
Right.
Her name was Shlomo Bas Divri. You know who the husband was? Dasan. The man that says to Moshe, are you going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian? And the man that's going to go in the next verse and inform on Moshe to Paro and try to have Moshe killed for rebuking him for fighting with his friend is the one who had been saved by Moshe the day before.
His wife.
Yeah. Not only was it his wife, the Egyptian was killing him. The Egyptian was beating him to death. Was beating him. And Moshe comes and saves his life. And the next day, Moshe sees him fighting, and Moshe rebukes him. Calls him a wicked man, says, why are you fighting? Why are you picking your hand to hit your friend? And his response is to go and inform on the guy that saved his life just the day before. Shows you what kind of an ungrateful person Dasan was. And Dasan was not a nice person. And I'll tell you more stories over the course of the many classes we'll have together.
Moshe know that? I mean,
He didn't know yet. He will later find out.
He knew about the Egyptian, so he didn't know about this guy? I don't know.
But it's all part of God's plan.
It's all part of God's plan,
He's
yes.
actually saving his wife.
Yeah, he was saving him and his wife.
Yeah, but yeah.
Saving both of them. Yes, he was saving his wife too.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%. He was saving his wife.
Right.
And the way Dasan repays this is by informing on him too. Right. Now I can tell you a deeper interpretation, a remez, a hint, hinted that Moshe says that Moshe says, or he understood, indeed, Achei Noid Hadavar. Now the matter has become understood. What does that mean?
It's understood why the guy was raping his wife?
Moshe was very bothered. Why are the Jews suffering so much in exile? Why is God allowing this to happen to us? Why are we suffering? Why are we under such terrible persecution, such terrible abuse?
It's how they behave.
And now Moshe says, now noida hadavar, now the thing is understood. Now I understand how terrible that the Jews don't know how to act one to the other. The Jews don't stand up as one together.
They're no different than the Egyptians, right? As far as holiness, right?
Not only that, he saw that in order for the Jews to be saved, in order for God to take us out of Egypt, we had to learn how to live together with respect for one another, right, to depend on one another, to stick up for one another. And instead, they're fighting with one another and then telling on Moshe to Pharaoh, right. Moshe, now I understand why the Jews are still in Egypt. Now I understand why they're suffering in exile so much and why they haven't been redeemed just yet. Now I understand. Verse 15. What's a good thing?
He was beating up his friends and going to rat on Moshe.
Why is it a good thing?
Because that's what made Moshe realize.
Oh, yes. About 15.
Pharaoh heard of this incident and he attempted to kill Moshe. Moshe fled from Pharaoh and he settled in the land of Midian. He sat down by the well.
Okay. What does it mean he attempted to kill Moshe? No man had ever escaped from Pharaoh's regime ever before. Pharaoh was going to kill you, he killed you. He had an unbelievable rule. And so it says actually, and there's a verse in Tehillim that describes this in hint. Without getting to the verse, when Pharaoh wanted to kill him, Pharaoh gave the verdict to kill him, his mouth became dumb. He couldn't speak, became mute, couldn't talk. And the soldiers couldn't hear, they became deaf. He couldn't hear what Pharaoh was trying to say. And then the executioner grabbed him to try and kill him anyway. And Moshe's neck turned to marble. Again, there's verses for all of this. His neck turned to marble and the sword bounced back off of his neck and killed the executioner. You know, he struck his sword down and it came bouncing back up.
Wait, Moshe was being executed?
They were trying to execute Moshe. Pharaoh says, kill him. He killed an Egyptian soldier, kill him. And then he ran.
He had like the princely status.
You know the princely status. Once he tried to kill an Egyptian, this is not a good word. Once he tried to call a man of the army.
Soldier.
That was, you understand? Once he tried, that's it. He not tried. He did kill a man of the army. And so, therefore, Pharaoh said to kill him. And then he ran away, and everyone that was standing around, they tried to grab him and turn blind. And so Moshe was able to escape, and he runs away to the land of Midian. Now, the Torah is skipping a lot of the story here. A lot of the story. Just as he ran away, he came to the land of Midian. But how old was Moshe when he ran away? He was a young man in his 20s. You know how old he is when he gets to Midian?
40 years later?
That's right, 67. So he's 27 when he leaves Pharaoh, when he runs away.
So for 40 years he wanders.
Now, where was he?
Good question.
He was in a land called Cush in Ethiopia. Listen to the story. Listen to the story. He comes to Ethiopia, and there was a town. I don't remember the name. It's from I was only on Shabbos, the Medrash. It's from the Medrash on Shabbos. I can't take notes, and I forgot to bring it with me. So I forgot the name of the town, but basically the men of the town had gone out to a war. And while they were out fighting a war, there's also a woman left. Bilam was no friend of the Jews. You remember who Bilam is? Bilam was he was also one of the ministers of Paro. He left Paro's palace when he saw how the Jews. When Moshe, he left the palace. Well, Moshe was becoming popular. He had tried to have Moshe killed. He left. He heard about this town. He comes to this town and he convinces them to make him their king and to barricade the city that the soldiers couldn't get back in. While Bilam is there and the soldiers, all the men, and the king of this country, of Ethiopia, are out fighting a war, he barricades these two sides of the city, the main entrance, with huge walls that were too high to climb over. And then there was this huge moat filled with alligators and crocodiles and all the scary animals. And the last time there was land, he filled it with scorpions and snakes and all these very, very poisonous reptiles. And when the Ethiopian army came back after the war, came back to go home, and the king came back to claim his land, Bilam had to become the new king of his country, and they couldn't get in. There was a natural barrier. What?
Were there any men left?
No, just the woman. He became the king. What? He was a king. And so they're stuck now outside of this. The army is camped outside of their home. And they can't get back to their families, to their wives, to their children. Moshe comes along. Moshe is escaping now. He comes to Ethiopia from Egypt. And he joins this army. The general of the army, the king, dies. And they're desperate. The king dies, and morale is very low, and they're going to disband. They had no, what are they going to do? Had no king. They had no way of getting in. And Moshe said, I have a solution for you. Moshe said, everyone should go and find a stork. Go get storks and raise storks. They all go and they get storks. Somehow they found storks. There were storks. A stork is a bird with like a long neck. The one that carries the babies from the hospital.
Like a heron?
You know, the fable, I don't know. Yeah.
Bird here called a heron.
Exactly, it's Aesop's.
Like a heron.
Yeah. Yes, Hasidah. Go collect them. They collect them all. They raise them. Now starve them for 3 days. Don't give them anything to eat. And then on the third day, they take these herons and they release them all in the field that was covered with all of these wild snakes and the scorpions. And these starving storks come and they swoop down and they devour all the snakes and all the scorpions. And then the army is able to come back in and reclaim their town. And Bilam escapes. And they make Moshe into the king of this town now, this country of Ethiopia. And so Moshe spends 40 years as the king of Ethiopia.
What is their faith? Does he teach them? Does he make
Yeah.
Is that how the Ethiopian Jews started?
No.
Really? No. Where does that?
How about
Where does
he
that?
had any children?
He didn't get married when he was there in Ethiopia. Moshe does not get married. Yeah, in Ethiopia.
Because they're not Jewish.
What?
Because they're not Jewish.
Right, he doesn't get married. At the age of 67, he leaves. There was a peaceful leave. They wanted to get rid of him. They wanted a local to be their king, not this Jew that was believing in God. And so he leaves, and he travels to... Yeah. And I'm sure he stuck out. He was a Jewish, and they're Ethiopians, He travels. He comes to Midian. Which is what it says here. Now he comes, he sits down by the well. Why by the well? He wanted to get married. He wanted to find a good Jewish girl for him, or a nice girl for him. Where do you go to find a girl? The well. The bar. The watering hole in those days was a well. That's where you went to get a drink. There was no bars. You went to the well. He learned from Yaakov. What did Yaakov do when Yaakov wanted to get married? He hung out at the well, and that's where Eliezer went to find a wife for Yitzchak. That's where Yaakov went to find. That's where he goes. He sits down by the well. Okay? What time is it? Keep going. He sits down by the well. Verse 16.
They came to their
No, the governor of Midian.
The governor of Midian had 7 daughters. They came and drew water, and they filled through to water.
The troughs. The troughs are where they would water the. It's like a big sink almost. So they would feed the animals to drink.
No, 17, right? But the shepherd came and drove them away. Moshe got up and rescued them and watered their flock.
Okay, so who is this governor of Midian?
Father,
What? Yeah, he wants to get married. Okay. Yes, that's right. The governor of Midian was Yisro. That's right, Mordechai. You know who? Yithro. Yisro had 7 names. Yeser, Chovav, Reuel. Why was he, you know who Yisro was?
the father of the daughter.
Yeah, he would become Moshe's father. But what else? I already told you about him last week. What did I tell you about Yisro last week? Who remembers?
Well, he was an idol worshiper.
He was at one point. If you remember, I told you last week that Paro had 3 main advisors. Bilam, Eov, Job, and Yisro. And when Paro wanted to know what to do with the Jewish people, Bilam said, throw them in the Nile. Eov, Job, was silent. And Yisro said, don't try and do anything to them. The Jews are blessed and protected by God. Look what happened to the earlier Pharaoh when he abducted Sarah and he got leprosy. Yisro lost the court and he had to run away for his life. He came to Midian, where they made him into a very noble person. But by now already he had realized the falsehood of idol worship. He had realized the shallowness, how it was not real. The ways of the Jews and Moshe had inspired him. And he begins to search through every single religion that existed in the world. He was a wise man. He studies and tries and becomes a priest of every single form of idol worship that existed. And none of them felt right to him. So Yisro comes to the people of Midian and says, even though you appointed me to be your chief pope or whatever, your chief idol worshiper, idol worshiper in chief, he didn't want to say I don't believe in it anymore because they would kill him. He said, I'm too old to be a leader anymore. I'm too old to teach and to preach. Find someone else. I want to retire. They didn't want him to retire. He insisted. And they realized while he was retiring, they would stop, wasn't a believer anymore. And so they excommunicated him. And they decided that no one's allowed to do business with him. No one's allowed to marry his family. No one's allowed to be shepherds for him, etc. And that's why Yisro only had daughters. He had 7 daughters, no sons. No one would be the shepherd for the sheep. And therefore, unlike normally the women weren't shepherds, the men were shepherds. His daughters had to themselves go to take care of the sheep. And the worst part was, whenever they would go to take care of the sheep, the men would abuse them, hurt them.
No one would marry them, the daughters?
No, they were excommunicated. They were considered a family. It was a disgusting family because the father had disconnected himself from any kind of idol worship. So this day they come, they drove them away, and actually says in the Medrash they throw one of the girls into the well. Throw her into the well. They threw the poor one out there. They threw her in. And Moshe comes, he rescues them. That's why it says he rescued them. See, if he just was feeding them water, they didn't rest. That's not called rescue. They threw Tzipporah into the well. He came, and how did he rescue her?
He stretched out his arm?
No. When he came, a miracle happened, and the water of the well rose. Just like the waters rose for Rivka. If you remember when Rivka came to get water, and Eliezer was watching, and the waters rose for her. Same thing when Yaakov came to the well, the waters rose for him. The waters of the well rose for Moshe Rabbeinu. It's fine. The waters rose for Moshe Rabbeinu. And what?
Moshe has a thing with
yes. Yeah, well, the water rose for him. That's why he was able to rescue her and to water the flock. Verse 18.
They came to their father well. He said, why have you come so quickly today?
So one of his names was Reuel. Reuel means a friend of God. Like Re'im, our friends.
Yisro.
No, Yisro is one of his names. Now it calls him a different name. Reuel. They came to the father Reuel. It doesn't say Yisro, it says Reuel. But Reuel is a different name for the same guy.
Right.
Same guy. It's called Reuel. He was a friend of a Kale of God. He says, oh, you're early today. What happened? So verse 19, Jeffrey.
19,
They said, an Egyptian man rescued us from the hands of the shepherds, and he also drew water for us and watered the flock.
Okay, and they actually tell the whole story. How the water came up from when he walked in their bargain, how he was took care of us and all that. Right? So what's their response? What does Yisro say?
He said to his daughters, so where is he? Why have you left the man? Invite him and let him eat bread.
Okay, so what do you mean let him eat bread? Let's go feed him? Yeah. Let him eat bread is a euphemism for let him get married to one of you. No. Right?
Where did you find that?
You find Joseph also refers to his master's wife as that he says to Potiphar's wife that my master has left me in charge of everything in the house besides for the bread that he eats. And the bread is a reference to a house, to a woman. So he's saying, you're 7 young women, 7, what's the word, spinsters, whatever. Say, here's a man that was nice to you. You guys left him behind, don't you know how to go on a date? Give him your phone number. What happened? Give him your phone number, a little lipstick on the side.
That's why they're
single. They're singles, no one wanted to date them, so they didn't know how it worked. They didn't know the tricks anymore. She says, go back and give him your number. So they go to invite him and have some bread. They invite him for a meal. Now, here comes a really crazy part of the story. Yisro was really excited. He heard the water rose for him, and he already researched all these religions and all these histories, and so he knew that maybe this is actually from the family of Jacob. He was excited that he would find a husband for Tzipporah. But then this man comes, the Egyptian man comes, and starts to say these most fantastical stories. That he's a Jewish boy that grew up in the house of Paro. No, he was from Egypt. He knew there was no way in the world that Paro grew up and let a Jewish kid grow up in his palace to be a prince. How can he be a Jew and be a prince of Egypt? And it's the story how he killed a man and how he ran away for his life and Paro wanted to kill him. He became the king of Ethiopia. By now, Yisro was getting very, very suspicious of who this guy was. And he was actually afraid for his own life. Because if this was a man that was trying to run away from Pharaoh, and he believed that more than he was a Jew, because he didn't look like he was a Jew. He looked like he was an Egyptian that had killed a man, and the Pharaoh wanted to kill him. If Pharaoh would find that Yisro was hiding him, he would kill Yisro. And so what does Yisro do? He imprisons him. He throws him into a pit to let him die.
Really?
Yeah. Moshe. This is a medrash. I love the Shabbos. Crazy stuff.
His daughter, and he throws him into a pit.
Yeah, that you have his story gets better.
He does something good. He gets.
Yeah.
Turns out.
Tzipporah though had a crush. This she figured out. She loved Moshe. Moshe saved her life. So Tzipporah's going secretly and feeding Moshe.
Well, why Sephora? Not you said that he.
Tzipporah was the oldest daughter.
The one he saved from the well.
Okay.
She will marry him.
So
and then she comes to her father and she says, you know what happened to that Egyptian guy you threw into the well, into the pit, whatever, you put in prison? He says, what happened to him? Maybe he's returned to the authority. I don't know if he put him to his own private prison. He handed him into the local Midianite authority. Says, here's a fugitive of Egypt. Says, yeah, I'm sure he died already. Says, no, he's still alive. What?
I thought he was the governor.
No, Yisro's the governor. Moshe has no family. Moshe doesn't know anybody in Midian. He's just arrived with Noah, doesn't know anybody. He's a fugitive from Egypt. Right? So he says something is, I don't want to be associated with him. Last thing I need is Paro finding out about this guy and finding out that I'm here. But Yisro would also run away from Egypt.
It reminds me of Jacob. Joseph.
Right.
He's the prince. He goes to jail.
That's right.
He's in a pit.
Our leaders go through tough lives. They all spend some time in imprisonment and suffering. It's part of what makes them into true leaders is that they're able to relate. Yes. Anyway, so she tells her father, no, look, he's still alive. Miraculously. She doesn't say, I've been feeding him. He said to the messenger, sure enough, Yosef is still alive. She says, if he's still alive, it must be a miracle. Takes him out. So let him come back to the home. I'll talk to him again. We know they're talking. And Yosef goes outside. Not Yosef, no, Moshe goes outside. And while outside, he sees a stick, a rod of sapphire. I don't know, not sapphire, of heavy stick, stuck in the ground. And Moshe pulls the stick out of the ground. And Yisro says, how did you get that stick? So I just thought, I took it out of the ground. He said, that stick has been stuck in the ground. I stole that stick from the palace of Egypt. Listen to this. Yisro took this stick. This stick was actually the stick of Adam, the first man. It was a stick of Abraham, or Yitzchak, was passed down. This was the stick that Moshe would do the 10 plagues with and he was supposed to see with and all that. He said, in this stick, when I brought it here, I knew it was a very holy stick. There was a tradition, and Paro kept it. You know, it was passed down. This is the holy stick that Yaakov had brought with him to Egypt. And after Yaakov had died, it was Joseph had it, and it stayed in the palace. So Paro got it. And I stole it, or from I don't know if I took it directly from Yosef, if Paro didn't get it, I took it. When I came here, I put it outside and I got stuck in the ground. I was never able to take it out of the ground since. And anyone that ever tried to take it out, no one was ever able to take it out of the ground. And you just came to take it out. I know that the stick is yours. Now I know that you have righteous lineage and that you really are from the family of Yaakov. And now I want you to marry my daughter. And by the way, the famous story of the sword and the stone of King Arthur, now you know where that story comes from. Because it's a real story. It's a real story with Moshe and his staff of Moshe, the rod of Moshe, that was stuck in the earth behind Yisro's house. That Yisro knew was a holy stick that Yaakov brought with him to Egypt, that he couldn't get out of the ground. Moshe took it out, and that's when Moshe said, when Yisro says, I believe you, I want you to marry my daughter Tzipporah. Verse 21. A lot of interesting stories in this stuff, huh?
Feel sorry for all the people that missed the class.
Yes. But that's why we're having so much Avos Yisrael. We're putting it out live on YouTube that they can watch after. Yes, there's so much depth to the stories of the Torah that people have no idea how much riches there are in every single paragraph, in every single verse. Okay, Marsha. Moshe agreed.
Moshe agreed to live with the man, and the man gave his daughter Zipporah to Moshe. She bore a son, whom he named Gershom, for he said, I was a stranger girl in a foreign land.
What do you mean Moshe agreed to live with the man? He's marrying the wife, the girl, not the father-in-law, right?
Right.
So the condition was, in order for Yisro to allow him to marry his daughter, even after all this, even after the stick and all that, he had conditions. His condition was that Moshe could not go back to Egypt. Yisro was smart. He said, I know what's going to happen. You're going to become the next savior of the Jewish people, and you're going to go there to save them and get involved with Paro. I don't want it. You can marry my daughter, but on condition you're not allowed to leave Midian without my permission. You have to stay here and live with us. So Moshe agrees to live there in Midian and not to go anywhere.
Does he know what his...
He has no idea what his mission in life is now. Not yet. Next week's class, the burning bush, which if you think there's a lot of depth to this story, just wait till we talk about the burning. We're probably going to have to do a 2-week class on the burning bush, because this burning bush is so full of symbolism and metaphors, and they live there, and he calls his son Gershom, which means Ger, a stranger. Shom, I was there in a strange land, in the land not where I belong.